It had been a cool October day. Katie found out that in the fall you might need a jacket, but you don't need mittens. Orbie learned that you can make puffy air clouds with your breath. And they discovered that even the ground can be crunchy when it gets cold. Mom was just zipping up Orbie's jacket. It was a chilly autumn afternoon. They were going to visit a pumpkin farm. And that meant they were off to have fun. In the car, Dad pointed out how it was getting dark earlier and earlier. Katie and Orbie looked at the huge orange sky and agreed. At the farm, there was a parking lot, but I have to tell you, it was a little different than most. Katie and Orbie could hear a haunting, howling sound as soon as Dad turned the engine off. Katie grabbed Orbie and clung to him in the back seat. When Mom opened the door, she realized that the two friends were afraid. Mom sat down beside Katie and Orbie and explained that the pumpkin farm was meant to be fun. It was supposed to be spooky, but a kind of fun spooky. Katie held onto Mom's hand tightly, and Orbie held Dad's. They weren't sure exactly what was fun about spooky, but they were anxious to find out. As they walked under the arch leading into the pumpkin farm, Orbie saw something white float across the sky. At least it looked like it was floating across the sky. Dad told the friends that it was meant to be a ghost, but in fact, it was a sheet bunched up on a clothesline. Katie and Orbie giggled. At first it had scared them, but now they knew what it was, and they thought it was funny. The lady selling tickets told them that the most perfect pumpkin was waiting for them. Katie and Orbie were thrilled. She pointed to a dark, shadowy path that led into a forest. The pumpkin was waiting for them at the end of the path, she told them. Katie and Orbie looked at each other and gulped. Mom and Dad giggled and reminded them that it was meant to be fun. The lady handed each of the friends a small flashlight with a pumpkin on the end that lit up. She said the path was terribly spooky, and then she giggled. As the friends walked, the orange light from the flashlights bounced along the path. And as they rounded the first corner, a little ghost jumped out from behind a bush. And it waved its arms wildly and said, "Boo!" Katie and Orbie both jumped back and hid behind Mom and Dad. The light from Orbie's flashlight lit up the bottom of the ghost. And he had on blue jeans with red sneakers. Orbie burbled quickly to Katie that it was a person all dressed up. And Katie giggled, and so did everybody else, including the little ghost. Then the ghost turned and leapt back behind the bush. They walked further down the dark path until they heard a horrible noise. Against the big harvest moon that was just beginning to rise in the evening sky, something that looked like a wolf was howling. Katie and Orbie stood transfixed, which means they didn't move, not an inch. They hoped it was someone in a costume, and they found out that they were right when the wolf began to cough. Excuse me, he said. And everyone broke out laughing again. Orbie burbled that it really was a fun kind of spooky. As they rounded the next corner, a skeleton tumbled out of a tree. It surprised Dad, who was right beside it, and he whooped, and so did everybody. Then the skeleton started to sing. Actually, a tape recorder started to play a silly song about bones, and the skeleton danced to the music. Katie and Orbie and Mom and Dad joined the skeleton in his dance. Then the skeleton zipped back up to his place on the tree, and the family moved on, carefully following their flashlight beams on the path. As their eyes were looking down, they didn't see what appeared to be a whole bunch of bats hanging from the trees on elastic strings. So they were very surprised when they bumped right into these pretend bats. Katie screamed and then laughed at herself, and Mom screamed too. It was very funny. They made their way through all the hanging bats and found the path again. The path now seemed dark, and it no longer looked like it led anywhere anymore. Dad took the lead with Orbie in tow. As they stepped past the two big bushes, one on either side of the path, lights flashed on and a trumpet tooted. The family found themselves standing in front of a great big pile of pumpkins. Katie and Orbie had never seen so many pumpkins in their whole life. The ticket lady greeted them again and told them they could choose any pumpkin they wanted, large or small. Katie and Orbie raced to the pumpkin pile and looked over them all. At first, Orbie wanted a tiny one that had a funny shape to it. But then Katie grabbed his jacket sleeve. She pulled him around to a pumpkin that was almost as big as Orbie. It was big and fat and perfect for carving a pumpkin face on. Orbie just loved the pumpkin Katie had found. Dad, I have to tell you, groaned. He asked if they knew how heavy that pumpkin was going to be. And just then a teenage boy pushing a wheelbarrow came over. He offered to help carry it. Dad appreciated his help, and together they lifted the huge pumpkin into the wheelbarrow. As they were placing it in the trunk, Katie noticed that the boy was wearing red sneakers. Everybody laughed when they realized he was the ghost. Orbie tooted he was a terrific ghost, and he wished he could be one too one day. The boy crouched beside Orbie and told him if he wanted to, he could come back when he was older and give it a try. All the way home, Orbie talked about how spooky he would be when he was a ghost. And Katie thought about the kind of face that would be just right for the pumpkin. The next night, they helped Dad carve the pumpkin and put a candle inside it. The face was just as Katie had imagined. The pumpkin was the most perfect one in the whole neighborhood. Everybody agreed. And I just know that if you'd seen their pumpkin glowing in the night, you would have thought so too.